Chapter 10. Crossing the old Alamo Road, they drove across the dry lake bed, making sure it was well dry. Just a little rain could turn a perfectly fine road across the lake into a wagon or automobile swallowing pit. The washboard road rumbled through the friendly Parangot Valley of shining water, sweet briar roses, and flocks of birds. They were headed towards the small railroad town of Las Vegas. Rader was hoping to spread the word throughout the railroad men and check out the Searchlight Gold District. He wanted to cover as much territory as possible to survey likely prospects for a return trip. He also needed to make sure that he could make his expenses plus some profit to make it worth his while. Rader stopped quickly at the Arizona Club, frequented by the railroad men once they reached Las Vegas. It was small and modest, with a plain pine bar where two small burros were standing, whiskey glasses in front of them like any other patron. Block 1, where the Arizona Club was the Vice Corral. The city wanting the railroad dollars without getting the rest of the town soiled. Rader figured he could turn a few jobs here before headed south. Ivy stayed in the car. They checked into the Hotel Nevada, where Ivy saw a poster. The Mesquite Club presents Mrs. Helen Stewart, Legends of the Paiutes, fundraiser for the Las Vegas Indian Colony. Public welcome. Meeting 6 p.m. at the old courthouse. Suddenly she realized how much she'd missed the companionship of ladies, cultured and educated women like herself, and Rader was happy to have her spend time with other women. She hurried to the hotel, rooting through her bag to find her one decent dress, a delicate cotton eyelet with green trim. She shook it out and was distressed at all the wrinkles. How could she go to respectable company dressed like a vagabond? She didn't even have a hat. She smoothed out her dress as best she could, then headed to the courthouse. Entering the meeting room, a yellow, green, and red banner proclaimed, "United effort towards peace, charity, and equality." Ivy settled into her seat. A petite, gentle woman took the stage, accepting a wooden gavel from the president. In spite of the heat, all the ladies were impeccably dressed, including gloves and hats, exuding a refinement that refused to sweat. Fans were in motion around the room. The speaker was introduced as Helen Stewart with much applause. Ladies, as you know, this mesquite gavel is a symbol of what we hope to be in this community. The mesquite tree nourishes the desert Indian women. They cook from its wood, make bread from its beans, and sew clothing from its spines. Ladies, I want to propose the building of a school where both whites and Indian children can learn together under the shared shade of this tree. I have brought a basket made by a native friend as a first fruit offering to auction towards this noble work. The basket was passed around so the ladies could examine it. Mrs. Stewart continued, "The Paiutes have a story, I think, that shows they understand God and are not at all heathen. It has been told by the famous Paiute princess Sarah Winnemucca's grandfather, Chief Truckee. One girl and one boy were dark, and the others were white. For a time they got along together without quarreling, but soon there was trouble. They were cross to one another and fought, and our parents were very grieved. They prayed that their children might learn better, but it did not do any good. Afterwards, the whole household was made unhappy that the father and mother saw that they must separate their children. So our father took the dark boy and girl and the white boy and girl and asked them, 'Why are you so cruel to each other?' They hung down their heads and would not speak. They were ashamed. He said to them, 'Have I not been kind to you all and given you everything your hearts wish for? You do not have to hunt and kill your own game to live upon. You see, my dear children, I have power to call whatsoever kind of game we want to eat. And I also have the power to separate my dear children if they are not good to each other.' So he separated his children by a word. He said, 'Depart from each other, you cruel children. Go across the mighty ocean and do not seek each other's lives.' So the light girl and boy disappeared by that one word, and their parents saw them no more, and they were grieved, although they knew their children were happy. By and by, the dark children grew into a large nation, and we believe it is the one we belong to, and that the nation that sprang from the white children will sometime send someone to meet us and heal all the old trouble." Mrs. Stewart went on to share the legends and the trials of the Southern Paiutes, and she closed her talk. "You can see this basket isn't just a basket. It is the story of a woman, her life, and hope for her children's future. The Indians greatly cherish their children and consider each one a gift. We have a responsibility to help these mothers as we seek to bring both beauty and charity to this town." The audience was clearly moved by Mrs. Stewart's passion, elegance, and commitment. Disease, loss of land, and dishonesty have taken an incredible toll. The people sing songs of remembrance, special salt songs for the children who've been lost to disease, and the boarding school programs, where children are forbidden to speak their own language or grow their hair. Many die in these lonely schools away from family and are buried with no ceremony. Tears were being liberally daubed throughout the audience. But we can help change this. We can bring charity and equality to Southern Nevada by funding this new grammar school. A lively auction followed applause as Mrs. Stewart sat down. Ivy didn't bid, but did offer a donation, happy to be some small help to the children. Ladies came up afterwards to introduce themselves and visit with Ivy. It was so good to feel a sense of belonging again. She really hadn't realized how much she had missed it. The journey to Searchlight was buoyed by the good time both had had in Las Vegas. They felt refreshed. They had taken to traveling at sundown due to the heat. Twilight never seemed so much the end of the day in the desert, but the beginning. Shadows chased the far mountains, pale prickly pear pads ghostly under a 3/4 moon. Searchlight was a profitable stop for Rader. Ivy coyly asked around about prospects, taking pictures. As she studied her geology book on the road, it became a growing passion with her. Ivy had a keen mind that liked to chew on a challenge, and Rader encouraged it. The only excitement between Searchlight and Beatty was the strange morning march of the tarantulas across the road, casting hairy shadows in the early light. That and the morning Ivy woke with an alarm at the sound of a gunshot near her head. A rattlesnake had crawled into Rader's bedroll. Feeling a warm, meaty lump at his feet, Rader eased himself out of bed and shot the snake, blankets and all. Carefully he buried the head, while Ivy cleaned up the bloody bits as best she could. After that, they were both quite careful to shake out blankets and boots, not just for snakes, but the small, pale scorpions that packed a vicious sting. At Beatty, they took some time to refresh themselves and service the Ford before their last push back to Reno. They loaded it up with 10 cases of gas and enough oil to slick a battleship. The Ford would get 13 to 21 miles per gallon, but Rader was taking no chances after last summer. They stopped briefly at a big sand dune to have lunch, and Rader drew an enormous heart with their initials. Ivy grabbed a blanket, sledding down the dune just for fun. Their passion had already ebbed a little, but these little kindnesses and fun kept Ivy's affection alive. Enough time had passed, they were no longer worried about Rader getting rabies, but it left a good scar on his shoulder. Sometimes Ivy would touch it with her lips when they did make love and admire him for how brave he was. They took a little detour to Rhyolite, a town already in its death throes, when power had been cut off just that year. It seemed strange to see lovely buildings abandoned in the middle of the desert. It felt like the end of the world had come. To the people who had lived there, hoping to make their fortune, it certainly was the end of their world. Ivy took pictures of a house made of bottles and a rough dugout covered in oil cans, the recent home of a rabbit-hole sniper, poorest of the poor, dry prospectors. Even their graves were marked with nothing but wired-together scrap. An old screen door on the bar creaked in pain, a squash fly embedded in the mesh. And Ivy found a poem written in pencil on a paper scrap inside a can nailed to the door. Deep enough. Where men were cheaper than lumber and dreams dissolved before the demon of doubt, searching for riches to whisper from dust, stones of emptiness, city broke down. You were shade from the heat, a wilderness rose, but men's idols bent low, their houses shut up. Mirth gone from the land, only jackrabbits laugh. Got to know when to quit, when a mind's deep enough. So here's a hot shot of whiskey to toast our next hope, to ease into comfort where life's not so tough. At the bottom of the can were a number of keepsakes, abandoned bits of dreams that reminded Ivy of the woman who'd thrown her ring into the Truckee. Particularly interesting was a ring with a green stone carved as a bullfrog, clearly from the adjacent Bullfrog mining district. Ivy slipped it in her pocket. It all felt unbearably sad and lonely, a place of abandoned dreams. She turned the paper over and was surprised to see it was the flyleaf of a Bible that had been used as scratch paper. Thrifty. Apparently nothing went to waste here. The towns of Goldfield and Tonopah, just 5 hours away from Rhyolite, still radiated hope, many of the newcomers lately from Rhyolite and Bullfrog. Mining towns ebbed and flowed depending on the generosity of the everlasting hills, and right now, these hills were still flowing. Rader drove on past Goldfield without stopping when he spotted a sign on the overland bar, quarantine for smallpox. Driving on to Tonopah, they stopped at the pharmacy for an ice pale moon dried ginger ale. The cold, fizzy sweetness washed the dry away. Tonopah was one of those towns with a distinctly dual personality, genteel money versus boisterous new town. There were tents showing movies of Camille and Birth of a Nation, and prize fights at the big casino. The town of the mill permeated the town day and night with the constant drum of commerce. Pigeons fluttered deep inside the cool mine workings or stopes. the echo of coo and wing adding soprano to the tenor. They both ducked into the outhouse after putting up flyers. The two-hole latrine, separated with a partition, was papered with comics and the Saturday Evening Post for a leisurely sit-down. Soap, carved like a Madonna, sat on a shelf next to a dry wash basin. Ivy was relieved when they checked into the elegant Mizpah Hotel. While Rader was tight with a nickel, he realized it was good business to occasionally have an upscale address while in town. It furthered his reputation as a successful professional man, and it certainly appealed to Ivy, who was becoming weary of daily outdoor life, especially the heat and not keeping clean, plus the continual added burden of the 22 and the money belt. Sometimes she wondered if Rader thought she was a mule. There was an air of excitement at the Mizpah. Apparently, a big fight was scheduled in 3 days. A 19-year-old youngster named Kid Blackie versus Swede Sudenberg. Business was good in the days leading up to the fight. Only 4 days out of Reno, it was a great close to the tour. Rader took a vacation like everyone else in town on the day of the fight. Beer and bets were flowing freely. Kid Blackie was stirring up the crowd, boasting, "I can't sing and I can't dance, but I can lick any SOB in the house." The Kid, at 6'1", was a fast puncher, coiling like a cobra. The Swede, at 5'10", powerful and steady. They went 9 rounds when the Kid accidentally knocked himself out. The Swede pretended to kick him around the ring in a bit of showmanship. In the end, both men shook hands, mugged for photos, and ate most of the food at the after-fight reception, both $130 richer. Rader enjoyed himself thoroughly. He enjoyed the freedom of men to be men. That night, after the hoopla had died down, he saw the two fighters stealthily throw their bags on a railroad cart and pump away together, heading north. In the morning, he and Ivy also headed north towards Mena, Luning, and Hawthorne, settled little towns with their own dentist. It didn't pay Rader to stop. Climbing the cliff by Walker Lake, the water was completely flat, a perfect mirror of the late evening sky, set like a stone in a ring of red mountains, pelicans gliding like misshapen swans. Gray water babies with flowing black hair uncurled from around the black medicine rock. Children of a human man and a rejected water spirit, they tricked and enticed the sons of men, sometimes drowning them. Their songs like flutes drifted over the darkening water carried out on the evening breeze. It encircled the car like a little whirlwind that blew through Ivy's soul. Rader drove on through the night. He had incredible stamina when pursuing a goal, and right now he was thinking of getting all his money in a bank and setting up shop in Reno with no delay. Maybe they would even buy a little house. Within the month, all his plans fell into place, and they were comfortably settled as he started a new identity as the successful town doctor and respected town leader. They signed the deed and opened his office on Virginia Street the day the first snow began to fly.